Thank you so much for having me. I don't think that I'm going to be as funny as Ella, but I do have two things over her. First, they didn't tag me with the wristband, so waiters, you know where to go. And then the second thing is that I've got an amazing squad of leaders from the organization that I helped lead, BridgeUSA, that sort of gave me the real, motivation to not only come up here, but also are the reason why I have something to talk about. I want to talk about how we can address and involve young people in this broader movement, and how we can integrate not only what Ella was talking about, but how we can operationalize the change that American Promise is trying to achieve. The civil rights movement in the 60s, the Vietnam protests in the 70s, the climate change strikes last week. What was the unifying factor that turned these moments in American political history into forces for transformative progress? It was young people. Young people have been at the heart of every single social movement, a unified citizenry that spans not only college campuses, but exists in urban communities across racial lines and different demographies, a diverse coalition of people that not only corroborates the work that you all are doing, but elevates the narrative and brings it from the backsides of essentially a lack of democratic engagement to the front lines of the newspaper. So how can we engage young people? What's the solution? One of the ideas that sort of came about to us about 3 years ago is an organization that I helped found called BridgeUSA. And Bridge has been not only my absolute passion, but it has elevated and helped so many individuals find their voices. Bridge invests in the future of democracy. What does that mean? What does it mean to invest in the future of democracy? We often look at politics as an institution, as a force that exists today. We've got polarization now. We've got racial inequalities right now. We've got social inequities right now. Let's address them. But the fact is that these problems have existed in the past and they'll continue to persist into the future. So what are we doing to build up the institutions that are needed to ensure that these problems are not problems in the future? Bridge is developing the next generation of engaged constructive citizens on America's college campuses. Constructive citizens. What I mean by that are students and young people, right and left, united by an ethos of creating not divisive but unified change, combining conviction with empathy, combining this idea that moderate does not mean that you don't believe things. Moderate does not mean that you're ideologically for or against certain issues. It's about how we engage our democratic system, and it's about how we express those beliefs. Bridge is trying to spark a movement on college campuses, community colleges, public state universities, individuals that don't have access to a college education. It's about touching different demographies so that the next generation can carry the work that you're doing today. So I want to thank American Promise because American Promise shares this commitment in the future of democracy. They partnered with Bridge, and they actually had Bridge students come out to this conference, and it's not to elevate American Promise's narrative. It's to elevate and give the voice of leaders of tomorrow a seat at the table today. And that is absolutely necessary. So what's our path forward? What are we going to do? American Promise is an excellent strategy, but I think that we have to figure out what the framework is. What is the ethos? How are we going to get people engaged? How are we going to get young people as excited about improving our democracy as they're excited about things like climate change, criminal justice? We need a call to action. I've got 3 ideas. The first is that we've got to make this thing diverse. This is not diverse in terms of a conservative sense or a liberal sense. This is about creating a coalition of people. If we're talking about improving our democracy for every American, you've got to have people that represent every American, because if you don't have that, how are you going to reach out to those people that currently feel distant from the system? People my age that have no hope in the system. People that grew up with the polarization of Trump and the gridlock of Obama and only know a broken democracy is the norm. Second, we have to invest in the next generation. And the thing is, American Promise did a great job because the investment in the next generation has to come from the next generation. It needs to come from people like Ella, it needs to come from people like myself, and it needs to come from people like your kids. Where you asked us in the last panel, how do we get folks engaged that aren't public speakers? How do you get folks engaged into politics that don't necessarily want the spotlight of politics? But I've got something for your kids. It's that the way that you create political change is by looking at the operation that exists behind a person or an organization. And I'm the prime example of that. We've got 35 student leaders out here. And I'm taking all the credit for their work, but they're absolutely on the front lines of not only creating impact, but creating unified change. And finally, the third aspect of how we move forward is hope. Hope not in this idea that politics is going to fix itself. Hope in this idea that if you reach out to people, if you facilitate those face-to-face connections, if you have those conversations, if you show people the theory for change, if you show people this is how you get from A to B, a real method, a real way to change this, I think that even in our divisive political moment today, where things seem absolutely hopeless, I still believe in everyday Americans, especially young people's ability to make change. So thank you so much for investing in today, while myself and my fellow leaders continue to invest in tomorrow. Thank you.